Hello, and welcome to the Blackbridge Mindset Podcast, where culture, entrepreneurship, and business intersect to fuel inspiration. This podcast celebrates the power of diverse voices shaping the future of business. So whether you're building a business, breaking barriers, or just looking for some serious inspiration, you're in the right place. The Blackbridge Mindset Podcast is hosted by your three favorite best friends, Mike, Ken, and CJ. So now sit back, relax, and absorb the gems being dropped on you by today's special guest.
Another Saturday morning at 8. It is 8:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning. It is, for some reason, we're supposed to be having summer weather, but here it is still cold. Had volleyball on the beach last night and took off my hoodie and sweatpants to play. But as soon as we stopped, I had to throw them right back on. It
I was
is
gonna say,
freezing.
you should have left the
It is
sweatpants on, if nothing else.
no. But it's freezing here, and it's just crazy. I was thinking the other day, like, it's Pride Month, and typically, like, at New Year's, June seems so far away. But for some reason this year, I don't know if it's because of everything that's been going on, but it seems like it was New Year's, I blinked, and now it's
Mhm.
June. Like, this year has gone by so fast. It's crazy. I don't know how you guys do that, but I just feel like it's
You have to look at it
this
too.
year's
We
gone by way.
spend so much time getting prepared and doing stuff for this show, and then, recording and regular jobs. The weeks go by quickly.
Mm-hmm. They do. And I feel like typically by now I would have seen you two in person multiple times, but I think I've only seen you two like once or twice this year, which is crazy. So in any case, I feel like people already know like what we do in our daily schedule, but anything out of the ordinary for you?
Man,
Oh,
I'm excited to see you all next weekend.
right.
I think it was 2 years ago. Whenever we were, wait, I don't think so.
The girls came. I can't remember if you came or not.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But it's been at least, I think, 2 years since we've all been together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to
A big
seeing
old family
everybody.
reunion. It's going to be
Right.
fun. It's going to be a good time. I'm
Totally.
excited for it.
Look, I guess I'm gonna
Plenty
have
of
to break out the
almonds, plenty of
grill and
vodka.
sit up and pick and clean some greens, huh?
For what? Like, I think
It's family
you
reunion.
guys, I don't know, but you guys have set up a pretty good itinerary, right? For Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday, and Sunday. So
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to be a good time.
it'll be fun.
Well, I don't
Looking
cook,
forward.
so I'll bring the champagne and vodka and a couple of mixers.
Oh my God.
That'd be my contribution.
Well, look, this would be the perfect time for us to sit you in the kitchen with an apron and an open notebook and teach you how to cook.
Okay. And look, you're going to turn around a week later and find that notebook still sitting in the guest bedroom.
With nothing in it.
Right? With nothing but my name and the date at the top of the page.
Well, we'll start off
Or a
slow.
few
We'll teach you
scribbles.
how to cook grits or something there.
Okay. I'm okay with it. But anyway, like I said, we'll keep it short because I'm pretty excited about our guest today. I was looking through all of her socials and everything. And I'll be honest, CJ, you mentioned this before we started recording. We're like, please explain this to us. But she is a small business owner, so that's why we have her on here. But I'm going to hand it over to CJ. You go ahead and do the introduction.
Well, I will have to start and say small business is exaggerated. This is big business. Like I mentioned to her and mentioned to you all, I did not realize. I mean, I've known this guest for a long time, and I knew that she was a beast in her field, but I didn't know just how beastly she gets. So
Easily.
the person that we are speaking of is Mandy Ralston. Is a queer, neurodivergent serial entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience in behavior analysis. Certified as a behavior analyst since 2002, Mandy has founded and scaled 2 clinics that delivered life-changing applied behavior analysis, or ABA, services to hundreds of families, schools, and individuals with autism and other developmental or intellectual disabilities. Her successful exit in 2019 to the 4th largest ABA provider in the U.S. marked a significant milestone in her career. Mandy is recognized internationally, get that now, internationally, as a thought leader in behavior analysis, ethics, outcomes, and practice. She has served as a subject matter expert on global panels, sharing her expertise to shape the future of the field. As a dynamic and sought after speaker, she addresses audiences worldwide on topics including autism, spectrum issues, and her acclaimed talk, It's Not Binary, Avoiding Binary Thinking in Work, Life, and Social Media. Her accolades include being a 2-time nominee for Small Business Person of the Year, and she's the 2023 recipient of the prestigious Autism Innovation Award at the Autism Investor Summit. Mandy's latest venture, Non-Binary Solutions, pioneers cutting-edge data analytics and technology, developing clinical decision support systems to empower ABA providers and stakeholders within the neurodiversity ecosystem. Mandy is deeply committed to reshaping how the world perceives autism and advancing the field of behavior analysis. Her work centers on fostering a more inclusive and equitable society, driven by the belief that diverse perspectives are essential to meaningful change. And with those astounding credits and a mouthful of acronyms, I bring to you to the table Miss Mandy Ralston.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome,
man.
welcome.
Thank you guys. I really need to find a shorter bio. That's too much.
No,
Well,
that's great.
Listen, the acronyms and the words are one thing, but I need you to first, before we even get to into any of this, can you please give the audience a more down to earth description of exactly what it is you focus on, what you do?
Sure, I'll try. So applied behavior analysis is a offshoot of psychology. And so it is specifically interested in measurable behavior, right? So this comes from the science from B.F. Skinner, who was the father of behaviorism. And Skinner did all of the experiments in the 50s about rats in a box, pigeons in a cage, right? You guys can imagine this. And what those experiments did was to help understand the concepts of reinforcement and punishment. Like, how do organisms behave under certain schedules of reinforcement and punishment, right? None of us sitting here care about how rats in a box or pigeons in a cage behave, right? But what we learned from those experiments, we now have applied to things that have social significance. So taking those same concepts and using them to teach somebody how to tie their shoes, or to get somebody to quit smoking, or to improve your athletic performance, or to get organizations to run more efficiently. And so all of that science later in the 70s started to be applied towards individuals with autism and intellectual disabilities. And the science was used to help those individuals learn how to communicate, to reduce problem behavior, and to overall try to live more independently and happily. So that's the shortest version I think I can get with.
Okay.
I got it. I love it. Well, to get us started, take us back. How did you get into this field?
Yeah, I had a textbook in 1999 at my undergrad college, Center College here in Danville, Kentucky, that told me 2 paragraphs about autism. And one, it was 1 in every 10,000 individuals at the time were diagnosed with autism. And 2, that the gold standard, quote unquote, for treatment was something called applied behavior analysis. And so I decided to write a research paper about it. And I met 7 families here in Lexington that were flying a consultant out from California once a quarter in order to cobble together these ABA programs to teach their children how to talk and how to function more fluently in their environment. And I became one of the technicians that work with those 7 families and those 7 kids. And so that's how I started learning about this. I just got hooked very early. I love kids. I'm very interested in science, obviously. And I got hooked on the reinforcer for me was getting kids to talk, right? Like kids that had language delays that weren't able to ask for things that they want, or weren't able to say hello to people they wanted to talk to. And so I got hooked very early on the power of the science.
Wow.
Can you tell us about how you work with families to determine if their kids are autistic or on the spectrum? Like, how does that work? I can imagine the story that you have But if you could just kind of give us a little background, that'd be great.
Yeah, again, I have grown with the growing rate of the diagnosis of autism. Back in 1999, it was 1 in every 1,000 individuals were diagnosed with autism. Today, it's, I think, 1 in every 31 or something like that. And if anybody wants the longer version of the story, I've written a white paper about it. It's on my website for nonbinarysolutions.com. Yeah, so things have been happening in the last 25 years that are making people more aware of autism, that is making the diagnosis more accessible, that people are, I mean, you basically can't talk to anybody that doesn't know somebody that's affected by autism at this point, right? It's, oh, I have a friend or a coworker that has a child, so on and so forth. And so the greater awareness is part of the contributing factor to the rate of diagnosis increasing, right? And the fact that there's less stigma around having a diagnosis of autism at this point. So doctors are more willing to give that diagnosis. And so I think families are finding each other thanks to the information era and the internet, and they're able to say, hey, your son sounds like my son. What is your son going through? What kind of things are you doing for him? What is his diagnosis? And so I think, yeah, the families are able to find that information more freely. Now, there's still a bottleneck in actually getting diagnoses at this point. There are waiting lists everywhere for families to get into multidisciplinary evaluations in order to actually get a diagnosis of autism. And then even after they get a diagnosis of autism, if that's the case, then there's a bottleneck again in actually getting services. So the proliferation of the diagnosis has caused multiple bottlenecks at this point for people to access services.
Nice.
Wow.
Understood.
So you gained all of this knowledge from serving as a tech in the field. You've worked with families. You've had the experience in college. At what point did you decide, okay, I'm going to take this knowledge and apply this to the general public and make this my career? At what point did you have that aha moment, and what steps did you take to bring yourself to market to offer these support systems?
Yeah, so we had those 7 families, and there was myself and 3 other women here in Lexington that were working with those 7 families, and we realized that there was a demand, right? There were all kinds of families here just in Lexington that wanted these types of services that weren't getting them. And so we also started to learn about a consultant named Dr. Vincent Carbone, who was a sort of forerunner for a particular offshoot of applied behavior analysis called verbal behavior, who was going across the country and doing workshops about how to improve teaching procedures within these ABA programs and so on and so forth. So we started following him. I always say I was like lightly stalking him for the first couple of years of my career, trying to pick his brain as much as possible. And he taught us about the certification process that was just getting started. And so we went to Jacksonville, Florida. I got 90 hours a week, or 90 hours in 2 weeks of a boot camp type of training, and then spent the next year having a supervision relationship with him where I was sending VHS tapes back and forth in the mail to demonstrate my competencies, and talking on a landline phone in order to get my mentorship with him, and was able to sit for my exam in 2001 in Nashville, Tennessee, with a Scantron machine and a number 2 pencil. So that's how old I am in this field, right? I got my certification, and we figured it out. We figured out there was a list of people that needed these services. We figured out a training system to bring in more technicians, hire people, train them. We found obscure funding source that was going to be able to cover some of these services. And this is way back in 2000, 2001, before there was any insurance coverage anywhere in the United States. So none of us were business majors, and so we made a lot of mistakes, but those mistakes informed my next venture the next time, right? So it's like I learned a lot of things the hard way, but that's part of entrepreneurship, right? Like you're going to have to figure it out bit by bit. When you're building something nobody else has done before, you're going to make mistakes, right? And so we had to wrap that company up in 2003, and then I spent the next 4 years driving all over Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky to anybody that could pay out of pocket for my services as a consultant. And again, helping families cobble together these programs by using family members, high school and college students as technicians. And providing 30 to 40 hours a week of intensive one-on-one teaching with these kids. And so after that first clinic, we scaled to 125 clients and 85 employees in 3 years. So again, really fast growth, which was part of the mistakes that I learned from, right? And I swore that I would never do it again. I was just going to go off and be a consultant and not do all this. And then I got tired of the lack of quality control. And so I begrudgingly founded another clinic in 2007 and grew that much, much more slowly over time. So that was part of my learnings from the first clinic to the second.
Nice. So from a high level in the beginning, once you realized that you had a passion for this, how did you go about planning and starting your business? Like, did you do like a business plan? Did you have like a big whiteboard? Did you consult a bunch of people? Because if someone else is listening and they're like, I want to get into healthcare and science, but I have no idea what my first step should be, what would your advice be to someone like that?
It's hard for me to remember the beginnings of the first and second clinic, so I'll try to tie what I've learned with this newest venture with non-binary solutions, my tech startup, what I pieced together. So after I got my clinic acquired in 2019, I spent 3 years inside a larger organization and just learning about the problems that I'm solving for right now with tech solution. And so when I left that organization, I started non-binary solutions. One of the first things that I did is I got involved with an accelerator program here in Kentucky called Launch Blue. And the accelerator is designed to help you learn about startup culture, like everything from the languages to the investor process to the fundraising, what the different levels of fundraising look like. Use something called a lean startup canvas as a business plan. So for my second clinic, I had a very detailed and long business plan. With a startup, the idea of moving into a lean startup canvas is that you're going to be moving so quickly that it doesn't make sense necessarily to have a 30-page business plan, right? But you do have to have sort of your major bullets outlined to understand what your goals are, how you're going to talk to your investors about what you're doing, so on and so forth. One of the other things that I did right off the bat, my first co-founder that I brought on board was a chief financial officer. And he's fractional, meaning that he's not full-time. He works with multiple different businesses in his capacity as a financial expert. But I knew that was one of my weaker areas in my entrepreneurial journey based on my first two areas or adventures. And so I wanted somebody else to handle all that. You take care of the spreadsheets, you take care of the accounting and all the different compliance aspects of what we're going to be doing over here. And that way I can focus my vision on the big picture. I'm the visionary. I'm the one got the big picture thinking. I don't want to be dragged down with the details. That's where I get bored. That's where I get distracted. So that was one of the first things that I brought in. And my second co-founder, which is essential to what I'm doing, was a technical co-founder. So again, I'm a clinician. I don't write code, but I do have the architecture of what I'm building in mind. And so Robert Beer, who is my CTO, is a translator of my clinical brain into technical code. So he is the intermediary between how I think and how to translate that to our team of developers who are actually in Ukraine. So does that answer your question? I feel like I'm all over the place.
It does, and I was taking notes, and I think what you just did was great, because on a lot of our other podcasts, people have said the exact same thing in the outline, and I just put it in bullet points. First, you went and you worked somewhere, or you got some experience first, right? That's what a lot of people say. Go get experience, work in the field, make sure you really like it. The second, you went to a startup program to get educated on how to build a business. And that's what a lot of other people said. I went to XYZ startup program. They showed me how to write a business plan, how to do financials and everything else. The third step was to put it down on paper. You said you didn't necessarily create a huge business plan, but you outlined what your thoughts were, put it down on paper so that you had a North Star and you knew where you were going. And then fourth, you started to create a support team, because you can't do everything yourself. You don't know everything. So you started to bring in the people who were smarter than you. And that's what most CEOs do, right? They're not the smartest person in the room, but they have a team of people who are smarter than them and help carry them on. So you actually went through the same process that I've heard over and over again. So I think that's pretty powerful for people to understand that, you can't just sit there and just randomly do things. There is a process that actually works, and people are doing it all the time. And you see people become successful when they go through that process. So yes, you did answer my question.
Absolutely. Yeah, and part of the startup process is pitching, right? You have to pitch to investors. So in contrast to the clinics that I built, those clinics very organically over time. I used the profits from the businesses itself to grow and scale. With a tech startup, it's the opposite is the process. You have to go raise money first so you can build a product, right? And so part of that process with pitching is having a pitch deck, right? So a PowerPoint deck that explains what is the problem that you're solving, what is the solution, what is your moat. I don't know if you guys have heard this term yet, but the moat is like what is between you and your competition, right? What is the differentiator about how you're operating that somebody wouldn't be able to come in and swoop in and steal your shit and go on and do their own thing, right? And so this pitch process is exhilarating and exhausting, let's put it that way, because I have gotten so much effing feedback. I have iterated this deck no less than 150 times, just in a year and a half process. So yeah, the concept of being lean and being coachable and being open to feedback and to constantly be shifting and changing and moving so that the North Star's there, but you're all over the place, right?
Let me guess. Everyone you pitch this to is saying yes.
Oh God, yeah. No, I've got boatloads of money over here. Things are going swell. Oh no, and it's super fun being me as a queer female founder with a company named Non-Binary Solutions, because I bet you can imagine the overall demographic of the folks that I'm pitching to. They're a lot of older white men, right? And so they have oodle of feedback for me about the name of my company and how I talk about things, noise. And so here's a fun fact for you guys. Only 2% of all venture capital, 3% of all venture capital have gone to female founders in the last 3 years. And that's an improvement, right?
Not surprised.
And that's if you're white, right?
And there's so much money out there.
Oh my God. And do you think it's statistically probable that only 3% of good ideas came from female founders? Or do you think that's a bias?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you specifically look for specific investors, or you kind of open that up to anybody who is kind of interested in the work that you do?
At the stage that I am at right now, which is still pre-seed, meaning that we've got a MVP product, but we're not at the growth stage yet. We're not ready to scale yet. A lot of that money is fairly agnostic in terms of their investment thesis. It's so early, like most of what you're coming up with is conjecture at this point. When we get to the stage of seed investments, that's where you're really going to have a group of investors who are going to potentially want a seat on your board. They're going to want to have more influence on your decision making, et cetera. So at that point, it really becomes more important to have a values alignment with who you're taking money from, right? Because they're going to be in your business, right? I mean, you're going to really want to be careful about what energy you're bringing in, right? Yeah, at that point, I think you get a little more choosy. But this early on, people understand within the investment world that it's a bet, right? You're evaluating the founder, you're evaluating the team, you're evaluating an idea, because again, you don't have product market fit yet at this stage in pre-seed. And so people are using their own analysis to determine whether or not they feel like this is a good bet, but they're also doing it because this is how innovation is done, right? You have to bet early in order to get some new ideas into the world and see what actually sticks.
Now, you touched on the name a little bit. Can you explain to people exactly what the name entails? Like, what does it mean?
Yeah, so there's lots of different reasons I named the company Non-Binary Solutions. One, first and foremost, it's a tongue-in-cheek play on the fact that I'm building a technological solution that is quote unquote non-binary when in fact code is binary. So a little double entendre there. But also, three main reasons that I named the company Non-Binary Solutions. One, people are not black and white, right? They are not ones and zeros. They are not the sum of just one category or the other. They are intersectional. And so, in order to appropriately treat people or support people, you have to see the full amplitude of their humanity, right? They are not just their race. They are not just their sex, their gender, their religion, their socioeconomic background. They are not just their diagnosis, right? So, it's not binary, right? It's all the things all at once. Two, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the founders of Apple, purportedly got into an argument at some point in their history. And Wozniak said, Jobs, it's not binary. You can be both decent and brilliant at the same time, because apparently Jobs was a little persnickety to work for here and there. And third, and most importantly, I get to speak internationally. I get to be on all kinds of platforms and doing these pitch competitions. And so I get to educate people by saying, did you know that people on the spectrum are 6 times more likely to not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth? So now, if you care about individuals on the spectrum, you also now have to care about non-binary and trans people, right? Because there's been overlap there. So I create empathy through education, hopefully.
Very thoughtful.
Nice.
So you were speaking about
Right.
your team that behind the scenes, helping you with your vision. What criteria do you have in place when you you pick these individuals that you want to bring aboard? Like, is there some formula? Is there some, I don't know, something about their background? Is there something about their thought process? Like, what draws you to them?
Actually, the process for me in this venture is chemistry. So Tim, my CFO, I've just known here locally, and I've known people that know him. I know him in the community, and we just had very good discussions with each other and said, hey, maybe we should be able to work with each other. Robert, I was introduced to from somebody else within the social network here, the entrepreneur community. And he was a project manager for another tech startup called Smart Farm, which was designing remote irrigation software for farmers. And so one of the people that I talked to said, hey, you should meet Robert. He might be somebody worth talking to. And Robert and I just hit it off, right? He got excited about what we were doing, started to understand the problem. He saw the scalability of it. He's got an entrepreneurial background. He's so smart. He's transparent. He communicates really well. And yeah, we just have great chemistry. Then the development team that I met, I always say that this whole entrepreneurial process, say it's like jumping from lily pad to lily pad until you hit lotus or land, right? Like you're just hopping nonstop and you don't know when the next lily pad's going to come up, but you got to keep moving the whole time, right? So the development team, I met from a founder, get this, Chris, that moved from Seattle, Washington to Paducah, Kentucky, because he got his first $50,000 check contingent on the fact that he moved to Paducah. And so when I met Dr. Stevens Bottom, that's his name, I asked him if he had any recommendations for developers. And he introduced me to the team of Ukrainian code developers that he was using and he'd been using for a couple of years already. So I figured if the smart guy from Microsoft had been using this team for 2 years already, that's probably a pretty good indication that he's vetted them and they've got some experience, etc. So then I introduced that team to Robert. Robert has his background in technology. He's able to bring in some of his old code developers to due diligence with these guys and find out that they really know what they're doing. It is literally like piecing together a quilt in lightning speed, right? You're just constantly saying this piece ties to this piece and how can I get this piece over to that piece? And you literally are just figuring it out in real time all the time.
I would venture to say, just for people who are listening from a high level, I think in the beginning, you probably put yourself out there and was telling people like what you're doing, what your plans are, what your business is. And then from there, you started to get, the universe was like, oh, this is what you want to do. This is what you're focused on. So we're going to start bringing in those people who can help you out. And then you were able to realize, and people were able to reach out to you to say, oh, you're doing this? Well, I know someone who can help you out with this. And you put yourself out there. So then the community was able to come and provide you with some resources. And from there, you were able to network with people.
Oh my God, yeah. Again, the fundraising process is exhausting. I've got a spreadsheet of over 150 people that I've met with. And I think my capitalization table, the number of people that have actually invested in the company, is probably less than 15, 12 people. So I'd say the number of times that I've heard no, but let me introduce you to somebody else, that's how this all happens, right? Like, you're never going to get it unless you ask for it, but you're going to be hearing no much more than you're hearing yes. So it's just, what is the Winston Churchill quote? Success is moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. That's what this process is like. You are dusting yourself off 151 times all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I see that, I'm sorry, 1 second, kid. I see that you have a strong social media presence as well. So that's another way that you're letting people know, like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. And I'm sure from that as well, like, some people, you've probably met some people, had some connections, gotten some leads in order to help you out with your business. So I say all of that because a lot of people are trying to start their business, but no one knows about it. And the easiest way and the free way to let everybody know what you're doing is through social media. So if you're not using social media, people, get on there, use it, let people know what you're doing, and you'll be surprised at the number of people who will reach out to you and offer advice and help.
Yeah, every time I do a talk, I end the talk with telling people that I'm very easy to find on the internet. And I like to say that I am vaguely professional on LinkedIn. I'm mostly authentic on Instagram, and I am completely unhinged on Facebook. So buyer beware, choose your own flavor, right? Whatever version of me you want, you could follow me on any of those channels.
So plus, why you started a tech company, and then if you can transition into, because I was looking at the website and you use some very relevant terms, big data, AI, and if you can talk about how those are not just impacting your company, but impacting the people that you serve.
Yeah, so I started this tech company because I found that this was the way that I was going to be able to help the most people as a single individual. So rather than building another clinic and only being able to touch as many people as I could with the number of employees that I might have or the number of service slots I might have, with a technology like this, I'm building a solution that can scale across thousands of people. The software is a way that I can translate my 25 years of practitioner experience into what I like to think of as digital bumper rails for other practitioners, right? So I built out how I think about bringing somebody into care and developing a treatment plan, a treatment pathway for them so that the user is basically sitting inside of my brain. So we've had a 500% increase in providers like me in the last 10 years in my field. And over half of the field has less than 3 years of experience. That's startling. Can you imagine if half of the oncologists in the United States had less than 3 years of experience? And part of the problem is also that I can get 100 of these providers into a room together and say, and put one kid with autism in front of them and say, how are you going to approach care for this person? And they will all have completely different approaches. And most of the reason they do it that way is because that's how they've always done it. It's not necessarily based on data. It's not necessarily based on the most up-to-date literature. It's just that's how they learn to do it. And so that's how they continue to do it. And so the software is a way of, again, giving them digital bumper rails so that they can reduce the amount of information that they need to think about, but it's still based on data. And so what we're seeing now, I like to tell this story. In 1999, when the rate of diagnosis for autism was 1,000 individuals, 3% of Americans had just logged on to something called the World Wide Web. Okay. And 5 years later, in 2000, the rate of diagnosis with historical data looking back was then 1 in every 150 individuals. And also in 2000, 80% of Americans had now downloaded music. LimeWire, Napster, right? So look at the rate of adoption of that technology in that 5-year period and how it changed the awareness and the rate of diagnosis of autism. We are at that similar inflection point right now in technology again with AI, right? How we basically operate in the world will look completely different in 5 years from now based on this new technology and the rate of adoption of that technology and how it's happening right now. And so we're seeing all kinds of new innovation, not just in healthcare, but in data and information in general. And I like to tell this story as well to sort of extrapolate this idea. I met a founder in New York who has developed a solution that is able to identify individuals that will be diagnosed with Parkinson's disorder 6 years ahead of time based on claims data alone, right? That's the power of big data and artificial intelligence, is being able to munge incredible amounts of data sets and be able to make predictions that human brains can't do quickly, right? With that amount of information. And so that's what I'm hoping to also be able to do with this solution, with this care navigation module through Noetic, and bringing all these kids, all these patients into a data set in a very structured fashion. Because ultimately, what I want to understand is who are all these very different types of people with autism. I don't know how much you guys know about this, but autism is a spectrum, and it can go anywhere from profoundly affected individuals that will need 24/7 care for the rest of their lives, that may engage in all kinds of aggression or self-injurious behavior, may not be able to communicate their wants and needs, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where you've got people that used to be diagnosed with quote unquote Asperger's syndrome who are now just lumped under the umbrella of autism spectrum disorder. And these are folks that have jobs, have spouses. They just might get called into HR on a regular basis because they're perceived as being rude. And so what I'm really hoping to understand with a big data set of individuals with autism, ADHD, and these other neurodivergent conditions are which types of individuals do well with what types of supports, in what types of environments, with what types of providers, and what types of outcomes can we reasonably expect to get with those individuals given those variables, right? So that's the power of big data, artificial intelligence, and technology, is that we're going to be able to better understand personalized medicine.
Is there a thought that this level of data is going to lend itself to research? So will you be sharing this data with researchers, with insurance companies, with medical providers to, I think assist in the early diagnosis? Is that kind of the thought in your head right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the big topics within applied behavior analysis is this notion of intensity. So, and I mentioned this earlier on, the early intensive ABA programs for young children with moderate to profound autism has been predicated on 30 to 40 hours a week of one-on-one teaching therapy with these kids from ages 2 to 6 years old. Not every kid with autism, even ages 2 to 6 years old, may need 30 or 40 hours a week of therapy, right? There are some kids that might do well with 10 hours a week of therapy. There are some kids that might do well with a consultative model of therapy. Sorry, I've got 2 kittens in the background that are absolutely demolishing everything in this room right now, including they just took my light out. So hold on one second. Guys, fun fact. The kittens' names are Schrodinger and Thorndike. Thorndike was a behavioral psychologist that did experiments with cats, and Schrodinger's cat. Is he in the box or not in the box? Is he dead or alive? I have fun with my name. So their nicknames are Dinger and Dyke. So just appreciate that. Okay, what the hell was I talking about? Somebody
How
started.
you're going to utilize the big data for research and utilization with providers and insurance companies.
Yeah. So the intensity is what we were talking about. So number of hours per week, that's a big question. Insurance companies have lots of questions for provider groups about how did you come up with the number of hours per week that you're going to serve this kid? There are agencies out there that just blanketly say every 2 to 6 year old will automatically get 40 hours a week. And that's not a clinical decision. That's an operational decision. And insurance companies want to know what they're paying for, and rightfully, right? And so I always like to say that it is supposed to be, if you think of a three-legged stool, it's supposed to be in the best interest of all three parties, the payer, the provider, and the patient, to have the best possible outcomes clinically for the shortest amount of time in treatment at the best reimbursement rate, right? That's a concept called value-based care, right? Like value being the amount of money that we're spending for the outcomes that we should predict. And you can't get there unless you have a transparent process about how you're arriving at your clinical decisions, right? And so I'm hoping that the software is also a way to get all three of those parties at the table together to understand that it's on all three parties' best interest to have those outcomes in that fashion. Right?
So I have a question. Going back to how you were mentioning, like, everyone has a different background. So there's not just two sides to every story. You also have to look another layer as to like what's influencing their behavior. Can you speak on how if I'm starting a business and I'm managing people and a situation comes up, how should I what should I do? Should I take a step back and ask certain questions? Like, how do I use this type of approach to better manage my team and not just, make haste decisions?
Yeah. Again, we all walk around with bias, right? And so it's important to understand that we are all operating through our own lived experience. My data set is completely different than your data set, and the next person, and the next person, and the next person, right? So you do have to take a step back and say, what are my assumptions that I'm operating from here? And are they true? Is that true? And so, yeah, thinking of people as intersectional human beings. Again, you are not just your race, you're not just your gender, your sex, your religion, your socioeconomic background, you are not your education level, you're intersectional. You're all of those things. It's not binary. And so you've got to find a way to have a conversation with a person so that you can match data sets enough that you would reasonably arrive at the same conclusions together, right? I think it's unpacking your assumptions and your bias and saying, what is the actual truth in this situation here? Feelings aren't facts.
Yeah, exactly. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of times it's more of a cultural thing that people are just not used to. I had a coworker, she's from Ukraine, and she is very, like, with her accent and everything, she is very direct when she answers a question. And a lot of my coworkers would just be like, "Ah, she's so mean, she's so aggressive, she's so whatever." But I loved her. I freaking loved her. Like, she would talk to the utility provider on the phone and be like, and I'm not gonna try to do her accent, but she'd be like, um, "I need to have this document by tomorrow at 2 p.m. Can you do that?" And of course the provider's like, "Sure, sure, I'll try." And I'm over here giggling because I know she's the nicest person in the world, but just to hear how she delivers it from her background, that's just how our families spoke to each other. That's how our friends speak to each other. They don't mean it in a mean way. When, she's like, "Button up your shirt, you're missing a button." She
Right.
In her mind, she's just saying like, "Oh, I don't know if you noticed, but your shirt's unbuttoned." But somebody else interpreting that is like, "Who are you to talk to me like that?" So I think just understanding that, not everyone is binary, if I'm saying it right, but there's different levels, and you just have to, like, sometimes take a step back and be like, "What are you really saying? What are you really trying to say?" And not jump to a conclusion.
Yeah, the folks on the spectrum, they are extremely direct in a lot of cases, right? God bless them. The filters we all operate under of trying not to offend people and trying to navigate a social situation. Some of the folks on the spectrum don't have it. And it's interesting. It's just interesting. They'll say something like, "I love your haircut. Did you do it yourself?" Just something like that. And it's like people would go, "Wait a minute." But they really meant it as a compliment. It's just,
Right.
you gotta, yeah. Different data set, different lived experience, different neurology. All of our brains are a little bit different. And I like to remind people too, it's like there is no such thing as normal. There's only common and rare. And rare is getting less rare because, again, with the age of and social media and internet and everybody sharing their stories all the time, you're finding more and more that people say, oh, I do that too. Oh, I think that too. And so we're finding more and more commonality. And I think this notion of what it is to be in a workplace culture, quote unquote, professional, I like to say that is a Trojan horse for all kinds of gatekeeping and bigotry, right? It's based off of white supremacist patriarchal systems, right? The notion that your tattoos, your piercings, the way that you talk, the way you dress might be unprofessional is bullshit. The professionalism is the behavior of the professional. So if the professional in the room is doing something, then it's probably fucking professional. Sorry about all my cussing, by the way.
I
No,
love you.
you're fine. No, I agree with you
absolutely love
100%. Yeah, I'm on board with that 100%. 100%.
So I know we're starting to come up on time here shortly, but I wanted to get this out there, and I want to switch gears just a minute. You know, considering you are definitely an entrepreneur in the field, and you are beating to the beat of your own drum, and you're creating the path for future entrepreneurs. Because you were one of the first in your field to be certified, and you're kind of leading the path for others, who were some of your influencers, and what role did your family play in influencing you?
It's funny. I think it's somewhere in my DNA to be an entrepreneur. So my father was the fourth generation owner operator of Ralston's drugstore in Weston, West Virginia, which started in 1856 before West Virginia was even a state. Yeah. I grew up literally going to the drugstore after school, and he would give me $1, and I would go next door to the Five and Dime store and get a Mountain Dew and a candy bar and go sit in his office and play on his computer, which was DOS at the time, right? Like black screen, green text, Oregon Trail. Like that's where I got into all this computer stuff. Yeah. My dad was the first pharmacy in West Virginia to computerize his business. He was also the first pharmacy to have a delivery vehicle. It was called the medicine dropper. I think I didn't realize the influence that probably had on me, but yeah, the idea that you work for yourself was just ingrained in my operating system. And I also say this a lot, I think because I was different growing up and am different in the world, it didn't necessarily always feel comfortable to go into organizations. Somebody else was the boss because I didn't understand the way people were arriving at decisions or making decisions. And so I think you'll find that there are a lot of queer and neurodivergent founders because they want to go make a culture that makes sense to them, right? Rather than sitting at somebody else's table, they're going to make their own table, right? So influencers, clinically, Vincent Carbone, my original mentor, was definitely my biggest influencer. I used to go up to his clinic in Nyack, New York, just sit there for days at a time and just pilfer anything I possibly could and copy as much as I could about what he was doing, and then put my own spin on it too. I think that's part of the entrepreneurial process as well, saying, hey, I see a better way to do this. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I just have to make the wheel a little bit better. And again, they're just processes about what your intellectual process or property can bring to a better solution. Yeah, of course, I've got the Steve Jobs fantasy, right? That you just go out there and build it and try to figure it out, and everything turns out shiny and great. But of course, now everybody knows too that Steve Jobs had all kinds of issues that weren't so apparent from the outside for a long time. Yeah, I think it's just a lot of different factors about how I got here.
Yeah, I hear that your mom was one of your major influencers as well, from a little birdie.
Oh, how, Chris? What?
It says one of the topics. It's on the sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Really? My mom?
Yeah, you had that listed. That's kind of what I was getting.
What did I say? Yeah, what did I say about it?
Yeah, we had two things. One of them was about your newest innovation. Is it Noetic?
Noetic.
Sorry, Noetic AI. So we were gonna CJ, I think, was gonna ask about that, but the other one where I think he was hinting at was that one of your influences was your mother and how she inspired you.
Well, no, on the
Anyway.
on the form it said you had mentioned ask about my mom.
Oh, wait, I think I was being tongue in cheek with one of the questions.
Oh,
I think I said your mom, not my mom. That's what it was. I was like, well, my mom didn't influence me other than me constantly trying to outdo the critic in my head. Yeah.
we
No,
over
I
here
said
trying to like give hints, decipher the notes, like your influencer. Who was your mom?
your mom. I was your mom. I was being a total smartass.
Got it. Got it.
Hilarious.
Well, let's go back to the other one then. Tell us about Noetic AI.
Yeah, so Noetic is the product of non-binary solutions. So that is the software that we have built. And so it's got three major modules right now. The first one is that care navigation module. It's a clinical decision support system that allows you to bring all of your patients into your care in a very structured manner. And then it writes a report for you based on how you answer all the questions within that. So it builds out a profile of the patient that then goes into that patient data set. The second module is called a goal development module. And what that is, again, is an interview-based process. Me as the clinician user is typing as I'm asking the family or the patient questions. And I'm tying quality of life outcomes to medical necessity. So this is to solve for something that frequently happens within our field right now, which is families will come into a provider's office and they'll say, look, my 8-year-old son still isn't toilet trained. He only eats 5 things and we can't go to church anymore because he runs out in the parking lot. And then the provider says, okay, great. We'll go do this assessment and here's your treatment plan. And lo and behold, the assessments that they do and the treatment plan that they come up with does not directly assess those 3 things that the family just told you are affecting their quality of life. Right. And so the goal development module is designed to reverse that situation such that you actually are making a treatment plan that's going to address the things that actually would be a socially valid, meaningful quality of life outcome for the families. And then the third module is an intensity forecast. So an algorithm that I built based off of my experience and treatment guidelines that predicts, we think that this is about how many hours this person might need in order to meet those outcomes based on everything you told us. To say that the Noetic AI software is like a clinical Rubik's Cube that I built for other people so that they can get to those decision-making skills faster and within clinical guidelines. In fact, again, the first time somebody gets a Rubik's Cube and tries to solve it, it takes them an average of 4 hours. With time and practice and learning algorithms, speed cubers can do it in less than 5 seconds, right? And so that's the notion of this software as a Rubik's Cube, is that it helps the users get there much faster than what they might be able to do as novel clinicians.
Yeah. Is this software only available to clinicians or is this available to the public? Is this like
Currently
now,
it's
you're in
designed
testing phase? Okay.
Yeah, currently it's available to clinician users. We are also starting a parent pilot. So I'm providing some free web-based consultation and designed to use that care navigation module to get some feedback from parents directly. But yeah, we're a pretty small organization still, so we're not at scale for the masses just yet. But definitely follow along and keep up with what we're doing.
And I mean, this is off the base of the rest of our talk with entrepreneurship, but being that you are a leader in the field, a parent that, is noticing issues with a child, what would you suggest be one of a few of the first steps that they take in getting the diagnosis and helping a child?
Yeah, again, there's waiting lists everywhere
Right.
to get diagnoses at this point. And so you might start the conversation with your primary care physician. If the child is in school, you might talk to them about doing an assessment, an educational assessment for a 504 plan. It's not a medical diagnosis, but it might get some supports in place. With your primary care physician or a psychologist, licensed clinical social worker, they could potentially use something called an MChat, which is a particular assessment tool that might help make an evaluation as the likelihood that the person might achieve a diagnosis of autism, or an ADOS assessment, same thing. Yeah, I think those are the starting points. Depending on your geographic location, your ability to access care is going to be quite different. People in Appalachia here in Kentucky have a very different waiting list access to care problem than folks here in Lexington, Louisville, and the larger cities. My heart goes out to families that are trying to navigate all of this because there's just not enough providers.
Okay. Well, I've appreciated this talk and conversation. I've learned a lot. I don't know how to easily transition to the next section, but I mean, I'm sorry, Ken or C, did you guys have any more questions before we go on to this sort of little speed round that we always do?
Yeah, the only question I have is, and I think you touched on it a little bit already. Can you give our viewers and our listeners, again, information on how to get in touch with you and how to view your AI app?
Yeah, again, folks can follow me on the internet. I'm very easy to find. There's amandaralston.com, there's nonbinarysolutions.com, and the product itself is Noetic AI. So that's KNOWETIC.ai. Yeah, find me on social media. Very easy to find me there. And yeah, the software is only available for clinicians at this time, but there will be a patient or a parent pilot program that we're going to be opening up at some point in the near future.
Well, we've come to that point where we do this at the end of every show. We have what we call a little lightning round. I don't think we have the sound effects yet, but in season 2, we're gonna have a little horn that goes burr, 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 burr.
Well,
For now,
people have been hearing about this sound effect for 12 episodes now.
Well, one of these days we're gonna have it ready to go. So
there's an app that you can use on your phone to do it. Just FYI,
there is. We just haven't figured out how to like tie it into the show yet, but we're gonna figure it out. Until then,
we may need your tech guy to give us some heads up information.
Eric,
what'd you say?
I said we may need her tech guy to give us some pointers.
Yeah, we need something. That's not the only thing we need help with. But in any case, CJ's going to ask you, I think, 5 questions or so. I'm going to start a timer. You have 1 minute to answer all 5 questions. And then, we'll go on to the last thing before we end the show. All good?
All right.
And I'll start the timer after the first question.
Well, before we begin, there is a bonus question also. And you'll understand why when I get to it.
Okay.
And I guess you'll start the clock after I ask the first question. All right, first question. Track or basketball?
Basketball.
Chicago/Detroit house or EDM?
Chicago house.
Favorite UK basketball legend?
Any Skywalker.
And I know you do a lot of speaking. Do you prefer West Coast or East Coast trips?
East Coast.
Which do you enjoy more, being in the boardroom or public speaking?
Public speaking, no question.
And the last question I have is UK or U of L?
UK.
Good answer.
Nice. And great job. And I'm going to add in there, like and it's not a question, I don't know why I said add in there. After I looked at your social media, you are a little fashionista. Like, I don't know if y'all noticed, but she's a model up there showing off everything.
Yeah, I have fun. Yeah, speaking of UK, the photographer that does all my photo shoots is a buddy of mine. His name is Chet White. And he is the director of photography for the University of Kentucky Athletic Department. So he gets to photograph all the track stars and the basketball stars and volleyball team. He gets to travel with does amazing work. And yeah, for the last couple of years, he and I have gotten together basically like once a quarter or once every 4 or 5 months and done a different photo shoot. And we have a very good synergy. Like I obviously can pull lots of different faces. I'm pretty animated. I've got lots of ideas about how I want to look and what I want to portray. I think one of the last shoots we did, I did every single one of the emoji faces myself, and we took all the shots that way. And so now I've got like a full set of stickers in my phone that is literally me acting out all the emojis. So
Nice.
Yeah, it's a jungle in here. Like clearly, I'm a creative output person, right?
Yeah,
I like it. I love it.
I think a lot of your photos, I've noticed you have like, a very standout blazer, or you play with colors in your glasses.
Yeah, yeah. When I went to the Autism Investor Summit in 2023, when I got that award, like day one, I walked into the conference area and some guy walks up to me and goes, "You are the most recognizable person from LinkedIn in this room." I was like, "Good, it's working." Right. I got a brand.
Perfect.
So,
Going
yeah.
back to the being on social media, letting people know what you do.
Or at least get curious, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do the peace pause. It's a little thing I made up. My head also. There's also weird things that go on in there. But what we're gonna do is that we're just gonna do a little pose at the end, hold it for a few seconds, and then I'm just gonna use that to clip out a picture later down the road at some point. I have 9 episodes worth, and I still haven't posted one. But one of these days, they're gonna get up there. But in any case, I'm gonna count to 3, and we're just gonna go like this, smile at the camera, and just hold it for a few seconds. Cool. All right. 1, 2, and 3. And good. Cool. Well, that's it. Well, I appreciate you. This has been great, very informative,
Absolutely.
and fun.
Great job.
Thank you for
Thank you,
spending your
guys.
Saturday morning with us.
Yeah.
Hey, I've had worse.
I
No,
love it.
it's been it's super fun. You guys are awesome. And all of you have great voices, by the way, too.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that because CJ's always the one getting the compliments on his voice. No one ever says like, "Mike, you sound great. Ken, you sound great." They're always like, "CJ has such a great DJ voice. He sounds so good on the microphone." I'm like, okay,
It's
okay.
true.
Okay.
He does sound
Listen.
good, but yeah, you guys all have
It's
great
true.
voices. So
It is
Well,
true.
look, you all be my agent and get me out there then.
Listen, I already told you how to get out there. You
Hi,
start,
you did.
you start posting online, doing some vocal things, let people know what you're doing, and somebody will pick you up. You got the voice for it.
Mm,
You didn't even have to show your face. You just read something.
I'm fine with that.
Read the back of a cereal box and get a job.
Look,
You'll
as
be
soon
all
as Sesame Street calls, I'm there.
right. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at that actually. I'd go on Sesame Street. I'm sure they pay real good. I think Netflix just picked them up, so
They did.
you'll be fine.
It's either Netflix or
You'll be fine.
Hulu.
It's
It's
I think
Netflix.
Netflix.
Yeah.
It's Netflix.
Thanks for tuning in to the Blackbridge Mindset Podcast. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, share, drop a comment, and leave a review. We're building bridges, one story, one mindset, one move at a time. Show our guests some love by checking out their socials too. Until next time, keep pushing, keep growing, and keep walking in your purpose.